Okay. Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to I'm going to just do a few welcome introductions, and then I'm going to hand over to Jim Sweeney, who is the Director of Product Management at Synaptica, and Jim is going to talk about enterprise taxonomy management, and then hand over to Agnes Molnar, who is the CEO and founder of Search Explained, who's going to talk about a new solution we call Discovery for SharePoint. Today, we should be doing about 20 minutes each for Jim and Agnes presentations, and hopefully end up with about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So let's proceed. At the end, we'll do a live Q&A session. Submit your questions through the Zoom Q&A button. That's the only way that we're going to handle questions today. We've got a very large number of people signed up, and so we're going to submit all questions through the Q&A mechanism. And if your question is not answered during the live Q&A, and we probably will not have enough time to answer all questions, we will answer everybody's questions through direct follow-up through email. So feel free to ask any questions you want through the Q&A button, and we will get back to you. We are recording this session, and we will be sending all participants a link to the video recording as soon as, well, actually it'll be next day. So tomorrow that link will go out. Introduce myself. I'm Dave Clark. I'm one of the co-founders of Synaptica. And Synaptica is a software development company. And for almost 25 years, we've been building enterprise taxonomy, ontology, knowledge graph solutions that help people organize, categorize, and discover information. One of the things that our taxonomy tool does is it pushes out terms to SharePoint through a term store connector. The problem that has been encountered for many years with pushing out terms to term store from enterprise taxonomy management systems is that a lot of the richness of the taxonomy gets lost in translation when it comes through to SharePoint. And we end up with sad faces, as the one at the bottom, when what we want is smiley faces and people to be happy with the overall taxonomy and SharePoint experience. Last year, Synaptica partnered with Search Explained. Agnes Molnar is known probably of you in the community. She is nothing short of a guru with SharePoint. And Agnes founded Search Explained. We partnered together to come up with solutions that tackle these pain points with the SharePoint Term Store experience. And so what we have ended up with is what we hope is going to be a lot of smiley faces. And we're going to be showing you this Discovery for SharePoint solution today. There's a number of significant limitations of what happens with out-of-the-box SharePoint Term Store. I'm not going to go through all of these. Jim and Agnes will be reviewing these in detail, and you've had a chance, obviously, to look at these, to come to the webinar today. The important point is that Discovery for SharePoint transcends all of these problems, and it really is time to talk to our customer base about being able to support things like polyhierarchy and associative relationships and better handling of synonyms and non-preferred terms. and really the ability to support recommendation capability. So this is a massive leap forward. We're really excited about it, and we're very glad and appreciative of your interest in and joining this webinar today. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Jim Sweeney, who's going to take the next segment. Over to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Let me go ahead and I have a few slides as well. So we'll go ahead and go through these quickly, and then we will take a look at a live demonstration of our enterprise taxonomy management interface and system, and specifically the connector that we use for linking that to SharePoint. So just a little bit about me. Been around the industry for quite a while, and assisting with the development and design of applications that focus on really using different types of controlled vocabularies, including taxonomies and thesauri, within really any type of application that's going to benefit and really be powered by that information. I've been with Synaptica for 15 years now, and as Dave mentioned, currently really in a role that focuses not only on client relations, but also managing a couple different products that we offer around taxonomy management and a few other items. Okay, so let's first, again, I'll kind of be talking more about the piece that is what we do within an application to manage those types of vocabularies. So let's quickly talk about what do we mean by controlled vocabulary. They really kind of have a few different levels, and we can start with anything as simple as what we would consider an authority file, which may very well be kind of a flat list of things, maybe countries or states, really anything that we want to standardize across the organization to make sure that we're all really talking about the same thing. We're using the same lists, we're not defining them differently, punctuation is the same, spelling, etc. From there we move on to things like glossaries or dictionaries. We're adding additional information, maybe a definition, a description, and it may, again, be a flat list, but we're adding some additional, what we might consider attributes to that information, or even metadata. Moving on to taxonomies. So really there, even though taxonomies is a very widely used term to describe what may be a lot of different types of controlled vocabularies, really what we're looking at there is a set of terms that adds hierarchical relationships. So we start with, of course, kind of broader terms and concepts, and then move on to more specific as we kind of narrow down or drill down, if you will, the various branches navigating the nodes within that hierarchical structure. And finally, in this list, as far as we're concerned for kind of our application, thesauri or thesaurus management. So here we're looking at adding additional relationships to the hierarchy, where we might have related terms, synonymy, and really kind of starting those associative type relationships as well. So this might be something that a lot of you are familiar with. A lot of folks that come to us are starting with something like a spreadsheet, or that's exactly what they're starting with. And as you would know, if you're using a spreadsheet to manage your taxonomies or thesauri, excuse me, they can very quickly become very unwieldy. So a lot of information going into really a tool that wasn't designed to specifically manage these types of vocabularies, relationships, attributes or metadata, and so forth. So what we often do is really kind of move our clients as they realize that this is not going to be a tenable situation from that spreadsheet environment to a purpose-built application where we're really looking at an interface that is specifically designed kind of by taxonomists for taxonomists. We have a few different products that have different approaches to controlled vocabulary management. The one we're looking at right now, the interface, and what we'll be looking at later is called Synaptica KMS, which is a very long-standing application in the industry. It actually celebrates its 25th year this year. So this application, of course, has evolved and been enhanced really almost on a yearly basis. We're doing a major release. And we did a major overhaul to the interface this past year. But it is, again, going to be something that allows you the types of views, navigation, searches, and reports, and we'll take a look at some of those when we're in the live demonstration, that really allow for individuals editing, managing those taxonomies and thesauri, the types of views and ways of understanding what they're managing, to get an overview of how things should be structured, where they should be placed within a vocabulary, and so forth. And of course, the idea of having customizable attributes. So again, the type of metadata that you want to associate with your terms. That all is going to be designed and put in the system based on your requirements. So whatever information needs to be managed within the application can be. And of course, as Dave mentioned, that's the type of information that you really lose when you move into managed metadata services within the term store. It's not really possible to maintain those types of things. And there are some other issues that, or limitations within SharePoint that we'll look at momentarily as well, especially when Agnes reviews the discovery interface within the SharePoint environment. So let's kind of quickly review some of those key points. So I mentioned really the idea of customized term attributes, and that's for each taxonomy. So as you're designing those, again, if you need a certain field, you're able to kind of create that, design it within that particular taxonomy, and decide, really what information is going to be valuable to users as well as to applications that are going to be using that information. I mentioned before searches and reports. We'll take a look at those, but you want to have multiple ways of really navigating and understanding and exploring the information that you have. Of course, another key feature is the idea of managing terms as far as their life cycle through a governance process. And you can actually design the types of governance that you want to have in the system as far as distributing terms or taxonomies for review, approval, and eventually publication, and even deprecation as things change within your vocabularies and your requirements. We have within an application like KMS the ability to have lots of ways of editing, not only individual terms focusing on those attribute values and relationships, but also bulk editing processes where you can do things kind of en masse, where you're, again, changing things that might affect the governance or different status information, adding values to attributes and so forth. Also within the application, we do have some mapping capabilities. This allows for really the comparison and analysis of two distinct taxonomies or other vocabularies, and getting an idea of where you have either identical terms or similar terms, and allow for kind of building what we call a crosswalk or mapping relationship between the two. It also is a great way to kind of do an analysis to say, what can I do? Do I need two distinct taxonomies? Can I have a single one? Can I merge them together? And so forth. Along the same lines of really, again, sharing and understanding the information as far as your various taxonomies, we have visualization capabilities, as well as a built-in kind of sharing portal where you can expose whatever information you want to share with particular audiences, and allow them to kind of review that, whether it be stakeholders, domain experts, It can even be a public-facing interface. So different ways, again, of kind of not only working on that within the environment of the taxonomy management system, but also sharing that information with different audiences. And built within an application like this, I mentioned the idea of moving from spreadsheets into a purpose-built application. So we do have extensive import as well as export capabilities, and a full suite, and I probably should have mentioned that, there of APIs, web services, REST-based services that can be used to really directly integrate with those applications that are going to use the different taxonomies and vocabularies, whether that be things like document or content management systems, and we'll see some of those in just a moment. So, what are really the goals with using a tool like our enterprise taxonomy management systems? The first is to centralize. We want to take the various taxonomies that are used across the organization. We might consider those and often call them siloed, meaning that different segments or divisions within the enterprise have developed their own means of describing things, of navigation, and as they're doing that, they grow independently, even though they may be really talking about the same types of things. Using a centralized, enterprise taxonomy management system allows for getting all that information in one location where it can be analyzed, compared, as I mentioned before, maybe mapped together or across different vocabularies. And as the next bullet indicates, we can, as we're doing that, maybe condense, maybe simplify, consolidate the information that we're managing in these disparate taxonomies and start to establish a standardization across the organization. So we're using the same vocabularies, or we're at least using a kind of centralized master vocabulary that allows us to establish kind of the standard for how we want to represent that information, even if allowing those different groups to still use the terms that they want, but we can all kind of link that to the key concepts. We mentioned, again, linking taxonomies, mapping them. That also allows for, as we're linking across different taxonomies of different types of concepts, we're kind of able to traverse that information. We can go from one idea to another because they're related, even though they have very different purposes or very different sets of attributes and information about them. And finally, as I mentioned on the last slide, we want to distribute that information. None of these tools sit as a standalone application. They are used to, again, be in many ways the hub of a hub and spoke model for knowledge management, in providing these centralized and standardized vocabularies to multiple applications that are going to employ them, make them available for whatever purpose is going to be most beneficial within that application. So, how do we do that within SharePoint? Obviously, that's the focus of the webinar today. Our enterprise taxonomy management systems and tools have built-in SharePoint connectors. We'll take a more specific look at this when we get to the live portion. But what we're looking at doing here is identifying the information that we want to move from our taxonomy tools into SharePoint. And we can be very specific about the type of information that we are identifying, how we want to filter that based on different things like status, or even assigning what we call a Synaptica category that we can group or create subsets, and then pushing those or delivering them to specific term sets within the term store of your various SharePoint sites. So we can, of course, have multiple destinations, different collections of vocabularies and terms, and deliver those right where they need to be. And as we'll see when Agnes gets into her portion, how that has been really greatly expanded within the SharePoint environment. So let's move on to a brief live demonstration. Just do a quick overview of the Synaptica interface. Again, we'll be looking at the KMS application. And effectively, the discovery application or discovery bundle it includes our Synaptica ETMS application, which is specifically designed to focus on building, managing, maintaining, and then, of course, distributing taxonomies and thesauri within the enterprise. We do have other tools that may be bundled with the discovery package, and those have maybe additional functionality, really based on whatever your requirements and also your expertise is within managing those controlled vocabularies. So with that, let me go ahead and share the application. So just a quick check, is everyone seeing my Synaptica KMS interface? Or anyone? Okay, great. So a few quick topics. This application allows you, first of all, to create what we call projects. And those are really going to be collaborative workspaces where we're grouping together specific taxonomies and other vocabularies with users. So not only are we using it as a collaborative tool, but also kind of setting up access control. So we're making sure that the right people have access to the right vocabularies, taxonomies, and so forth, as well as the right permissions, where we can set up exactly what their role will be. As you've seen in some of the screen captures, one of the keys is the ability to navigate to find what we're looking for. We can drill down, if you will, across these hierarchical structures within this presentation until we arrive at specifically the term that we want to look at. In this case, we can go ahead and open up details. Whoops, let me go ahead and refresh there. Won't go quite as far down in this case, but let's just open up any individual term and get the details for that specific term, where we, again, if we have permissions, can manage not only the details for that term, as well as different status information, but also, of course, the relationships that are assigned to that specific term. In doing that, really, again, start to create that network, if you will, of relationships, links, and ties between the terms to create structure not only within a taxonomy, but as I mentioned, across different taxonomies. Of course, as part of a tool like this, we also want to focus on search. So lots of different options, again, to filter and look at exactly those terms that we want to arrive at, if you will. So being able to search across things like attribute values, various status information, and we're generating an entire audit trail for all those activities that are going on. I mentioned the idea of individual term management versus bulk term management. So within the tools area that's accessible to editors and other users across the system, we have our import, we have a SharePoint connector, we'll take a look at that in just a moment, and various tools that allow us to kind of do bulk editing processes, the mapping I mentioned as well. And very quickly, a number of different reports that focus on a variety of different views, if you will, of that information. So different ways of producing lists in a variety of different output formats, which may include kind of tabular outputs like spreadsheets, CSV files, but also XML. And of course, with the APIs, with the REST services, we can really do anything as far as viewing or extracting that information. Anything that can be done through the interface can also be done via those services. And just one quick point as far as administration of the system, that's all accessible through the interface as well. It's limited to just those individuals to which we or to whom we assign what we call an administrator or system or super administrator status. And they're able then, again, to build those vocabularies, relationships that'll be used in them, manage users, and manage the projects. So let's quickly go back up and take a look specifically at the SharePoint connector. And I'll go through the processes here that we would use to really create that package that we want to deliver into the SharePoint environment. So we would start by determining what site, SharePoint site, we want to deliver that information to. We can have multiples here, and that'll get assigned later when we build our export jobs. But we can identify exactly where we want to move that information, and of course log in as whatever SharePoint user we would want to kind of track and monitor that. We would next set up a list of what we call profiles, and within any profile we specify what information or what various, I'll go ahead and edit this, what levels, what relationships, what labels we want to move into the environment. Now initially this is going to be done to create an instance, if you will, within the term store. But as we'll see when Agnes gets into her demonstration, we're really looking at then kind of going back to the KMS application and utilizing a lot of the additional details that normally get lost in translation, as David said. So again, these profiles allow us to specify the type of information that we want to move into the term store, at least initially. We can have multiple profiles, and finally, we would go ahead and build export jobs, and these can be scheduled for different time periods. As we're creating these, we can identify exactly which of the profiles we want to include. Multiples can be included, and of course scheduling that information to, on a regular basis, get those terms and taxonomies into the SharePoint environment. And really it comes down to, you know, the frequency might be the frequency with which that vocabulary or taxonomy is being edited. So that, again, is kind of what we have within the Synaptica environment. And again, what we're really looking at is a purpose-built application that allows you to very easily and intuitively build and maintain those taxonomies, and not just for SharePoint, but really for a variety of different applications, whether that be again, content management systems besides SharePoint, processes like auto classification, search tools where we're providing a variety of different taxonomies with relationships to expand that search experience, not only again within SharePoint, but also some other areas. So with that, let me go ahead and hand over to Agnes, where we can see how we're using this information that we have within our taxonomy management tool within SharePoint.
Thank you, Jim. So let me share my screen. So my name is Agnes Molnar, and I've been working with SharePoint for forever, almost, from the very first version. And my primary focus has been on content management and later search. So I've been working with search in SharePoint and Office 365 for over 10 years now. And this is what we do at Search Explained. We basically explain how search works, and we provide trainings and workshops and consulting, and also custom development for our clients. And today I'm going to show you the other part of this solution, how it can enrich the SharePoint experience and how it can enrich the search experience in SharePoint. So basically, when we are talking about search in SharePoint, Office 365, we have a lot of things to tie together to provide a really good search experience. And one of them is the metadata and taxonomy. So usually when I do a workshop or training about search, I say that metadata is the soul of search or the heart of search. Basically, without good metadata, it's almost impossible to have good search. And this is why we are really excited about working together with Synaptica, because Synaptica's mission is to provide good taxonomy and good metadata. And if we can connect it to SharePoint and the SharePoint content, then we are having a much better chance to have a good search experience in SharePoint. So this is our mission, and this has been our goal, working together. So basically the idea is to use the features, to use the capabilities of SharePoint for content management, use content types as much as possible, to use everything that is in SharePoint, plus enhance its taxonomy management capabilities. Because as you know, the Managed Metadata Term Store has a lot of limitations. So basically, as Jim just demonstrated with the Synaptica KMS, you can have a centralized taxonomy management system. So you can have a system to manage and maintain your taxonomy independently from SharePoint, independently from any other systems. And now I'm going to show you what happens if you connect it to SharePoint and what's possible with our discovery solution. So I have prepared a few screenshots just in case, but I'm going to switch over to our demo environment to show you how it works from the user's perspective. So here you can see I have a SharePoint site, and I have a document library here. In this document library, we are storing a few documents, and you can see that we have some columns here where we store information about those documents. If I edit one of those documents' properties, you can see that I have the out-of-the-box name and the title of this document here, but also I have two properties called IPTC media topics and AP subject. If I click on edit here, this is not the out-of-the-box SharePoint property editor. This is our custom taxonomy user interface here. So what you can see here is basically the taxonomy is coming from the Synaptica tool, and we display it here in SharePoint, but this taxonomy is connected to a SharePoint column. So basically the information, the terms are stored in a SharePoint column to the document. Here I have two interfaces to work with. The first one, if I open any of these, you can see that I can open the structure, I can open the hierarchy, and if I select any of them, the selected one will be added, which I can see here in the bottom of this window. So I'm selecting business insurance, and business insurance is added, and also the parent of this term, corporate news, is added, because this is how this environment is configured. So this is one user interface. I can browse the hierarchy, I can browse the taxonomy, and what you can see here basically is a tree-like browser user interface, but basically we support polyhierarchy here. So if you have a term that has multiple parents, then you will be able to see that at each places here. The other thing we can see here is search for a tag. So if I'm doing a search for something here, you can see that here are the terms as the terms for my search. So I can select any of those terms, and it will be added. It will be added according to the rules and according to the configuration to the assigned terms down here. And if I hover my mouse over any of those terms, you can see that we are displaying additional information, like the definition for this term. And basically, if any of those terms has more information, like definition, a broader term used for related terms, we can display all those information coming from Synaptica KMS. And this hover over panel is absolutely configurable, so you can define what you want to see here and what is important for your users. So I'm going to click OK and going to save this document. And you can see that this is just a SharePoint document library. The other thing that we have implemented here for the users who create content is a user interface to upload or create documents, multiple documents at the same time. So basically what you can see here is you are on this site, but if you have multiple sites, if you have multiple site collections, you can select those as well. In this environment, we have only this site collection and this site, so this is why I don't have this drop down there. But as soon as you have multiple sites, you can select the one that you want to use, and you select the document library, and you select the content type that you would like to use. And here you have this choose files button, and you select the files that you want to upload, and then maybe this one would be better. So you select multiple files. If you don't use them, sorry about that. And then you can edit webinar slides. You can edit the name and the title. And if you click next, this is where my favorite part comes. You have those taxonomies here, and you can use the same taxonomy browser, or you can search for the terms. And as soon as you select any of them that you want to assign, the selected terms will be assigned to each of those documents that you are just about to upload. So in this case, I have selected only one document, but if you select 2, if you select 10, those terms will be applied to each of them when you upload those documents. So let me select something for here as well and upload the document. So basically this is how to create or how to upload multiple documents with the same terms without editing them, editing each one by one. Okay, let's switch to search. So we have a search page here, and if I search for accounting, if I search for accounting, you can see different things here. The first thing is, of course, you can edit those terms. So you can create your custom display template. You can add that metadata, because this is just any out-of-the-box SharePoint properties. So you can create those as managed properties in the search schema and then display them on the display template. But also, we have created a hierarchical refiner, which is a much better than the out-of-the-box flat search refiner. And also, as I mentioned, on the user interface for creating document, we also support polyhierarchy here, so you can see the accounting Freud here, you can see it here, and if I scroll down, probably you can see it on multiple places because this term has multiple parents. So this is not like 3 or 4 different terms in your taxonomy. This is one term with multiple parents. But this is how we display it on the refinement panel. On the other hand, using advanced taxonomy is that you can have relationships between your terms. And if you have related terms, if you have synonyms, if you connect your terms in any non-hierarchical way, that also can be useful for search. So for example, on this page, you can see related searches. And those related searches are also terms based on the relationships between the terms. So I did a search for accounting and I got documents tagged with multiple terms, and those related searches here are searches that are related to the ones that are related to my current search. And in this case, if I click on one of those terms like business insurance, I initiate a new search with business insurance. But if you like, it can be it can work like a refiner as well, so it can be added to the current query depending on your requirements. In this case, it is configured to run a new search. And you can imagine that the possibilities are endless depending on what you store in your taxonomy, what kind of content you store, how your information architecture looks like in SharePoint. If you know me, you know I could talk about this for hours because this is one of my favorite topics. Now, I would like to show you only one more thing. If my PowerPoint wakes up, which is basically, yes, the last thing that I would like to show you is, I'm sorry, my PowerPoint totally got crazy today, and I have no idea why. Okay, anyway, so my PowerPoint just died. I'm sorry about that. The last thing I wanted to show is this. If you use SharePoint and if you use the out-of-the-box managed metadata term store, basically that taxonomy is tied to SharePoint and you can use it in SharePoint only. If you use external taxonomy management system like Synaptica and store your taxonomy there, that means that you can connect your enterprise taxonomy management system to multiple systems, either multiple SharePoint instances, or it can be a non-SharePoint system as well. And if you connect those systems to search, that means you have a unified and a really nice and unified search experience as well. So there are many different options what is possible with this solution. Basically, that's what I wanted to share today. And now I am handing over to Dave, so we can discuss the questions. And
okay, thank you, Agnes. And Agnes, while I just talk briefly on the next slide, if you want to have a scan through the open questions and see if there's anything particularly that grabs your eye there. We've got 6, the questions are suddenly coming in thick and fast, so we won't get to all of them, but if you want to see if there's anything that you particularly want to answer there. This slide is really just to let you know that Search Explained have done is put together essentially a package of everything you would need if you wanted to implement what Jim and Agnes have just shown you. So it's sort of like a bundle of tools and services. So there's obviously Enterprise, the Taxonomy Management System, the SharePoint Connector, the Discovery for SharePoint plugin, which goes into your SharePoint system and gives you the search and browse and tag options that have been illustrated. There's also installation and training, and one of the things that Search Explained do with all of their clients is they start with an on-site workshop. This is normally 1 to 2 days, and that's really to get under the skin of how do you do SharePoint? What are your goals? How are your users wanting to search and browse and tag with it? Because out of that workshop and a knowledge of your particular use cases, your particular desired experience, user experience, some customizations can be made to the plugin that will fine-tune that experience for you. So we kind of put all of that together into something that we think will give you a complete turnkey solution. So I'm going to move to the Q&A now. Very briefly, the questions I answered live as they were coming in. We had a number of questions about associative relationships and bidirectional relationships. Yes, they are covered. Disambiguation. Yes, there's standard ways to disambiguate terms in the Synaptica taxonomy. We can split out the main term from the modifier, push them together to create a unique descriptor, supply those individually or separately. We can also tag subsets of a taxonomy as being particularly relevant to different audience sectors, and then push those out to designated term stores. So there's a number of different ways that can be handled. There was a question about volume and scale. These systems have been used for very high scale taxonomies in the order of hundreds of thousands of concepts. So that's covered some of the questions I answered. Now let's turn to the open questions. Agnes, I'm going to ask you if there's anything particularly there that you would like to talk to that is particularly relevant to the show.
Yes, I have responded a few questions in the chat, but just to recap a few of them. The version of SharePoint I used in the demo is SharePoint 2016, but it could be SharePoint 2013 or 2019 as well. And we are working on the SharePoint Online version, which will be available very soon as well. And also I got a question about the term, about the tagging user interface. Basically when I selected a term in the term browse user interface, the parent term was also added to the document. The same happens if you search for a term and you select a term, parents will be also added. One thing to consider here is that it can be configured. in which cases you want to add the parent term and in which cases you don't want to add the parent term. So in this environment, if you select a term that is on the third level of the taxonomy, its second level parent term will be also added. But if you select a second level term in the taxonomy, the first level parent is not added. So those kind of configurations can be added, and those kind of things can be configured, but basically it's all consistent. So once you configure those rules, whatever you do on the taxonomy browse user interface, the same behavior you will get in the term search experience as well. We also had a question about the synonyms. Yes, we can search by the synonyms if you define them in Synaptica, and you can absolutely configure what you want to do with those synonyms. So for example, synonyms can be part of the related searches or can be excluded from the related searches as well. But definitely if you do a search, the search respects the synonyms that are configured in Synaptica. Checking the open questions. Can you edit this custom taxonomy property from Microsoft Word? We haven't. So basically, Microsoft Word, you can see the terms, yes, because we connect the Synaptica taxonomies to SharePoint Term Store. So this way you can see the terms in the term store in Microsoft Word, but we don't have this rich term user interface in Office clients yet. Another question, does this work on OneDrive or just SharePoint? It's just SharePoint at the moment. And there is one more question about the modern team and communication sites and how it works with the modern sites, because my demo was on Classic. As I said, we are working on the SharePoint Online option and the SharePoint Online integration. And once it's done, it will work on the modern UI as well. Yes. I think those are the SharePoint related questions that we've got.
Okay, and so there's a question there about managing broader terms and synonyms. I think you've answered the synonyms that become searchable as well as available through the tagging interface, Agnes. Broader terms, one of the key things that we've been able to do with this experience is provide support for polyhierarchy. It's been an age-old bugaboo that we were not able to support those kinds of structures. So I think that that's going to open a lot of possibilities for people who are using the polyhierarchical structure. Let's see, we've got some questions here about GUIDs. So one of the things about GUIDs, I'll explain a little bit about this, and Agnes, add anything else. Obviously, SharePoint creates a GUID when a new concept enters the term store. One of the things that happens behind the scenes with this tool is it binds the SharePoint GUID to the UID of that concept in the originating system in the Synaptica Enterprise Taxonomy Management System. So those two IDs are bound together. That allows us to do synchronized updates and make sure that everything is married together. Let's see what we've got time for. Well, we're actually on the hour. Anything else you wanted to add, Jim or Agnes? And then we will go through all the other questions that are open and get those answered through email.
This is Jim Sweeney. I'd say that, yeah, basically we are happy to follow up. We will be following up with any open questions. Certainly regarding taxonomy management functionality, as well as the discovery functionality. And we can also, provide demonstrations, trial access of our various taxonomy tools, as well as talk about what else is available as far as expanding or kind of upgrading your management tools and still using them with the discovery product.
Great. Okay, so I think we will call that a wrap. It's a couple of minutes after the hour. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Agnes. And most of all, thank you all the participants who joined us today. Really appreciate your interest. We will get those questions answered. And as Jim said, if you want to have a conversation, have a look at any kind of live demonstrations with us one-on-one, just reach out to us through email or reply to the email you're going to receive from Search Explained tomorrow with the link to the video. Just send us a note and we will be very happy to continue the conversation with you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.